Mr. Young has been actively involved in public policy issues all his adult life, serving as a clergyman, civil rights leader, congressman, United States Ambassador to the United Nations, and currently as mayor of Atlanta, Georgia. In the 1960s, Mayor Young was a close associate of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., participating in the major civil rights movements of the day. In 1972, he was elected to the United States Congress in the state of Georgia and served on the House Banking and Currency Committee and its subcommittees on international finance, international trade, mass transportation, and consumer affairs. In fact, Mayor Young mentioned to me just a moment ago that he and Matt Ronaldo started at the same time in the Congress. In his second term, and until he left Congress to become UN ambassador, he was a member of the very important House Rules Committee. With the election of President Jimmy Carter in 1976, Andrew Young was announced as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, where he served from 1977 through 1979. During that time, he was also a member of the Cabinet and the National Security Council. Mayor Young is a graduate of Howard University and the Hartford Theological Seminary and has received numerous honorary degrees and awards, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian award. Elected as Atlanta's mayor in 1982, Mr. Young is Chief Executive Officer of a city government with 8,000 employees and an annual operating budget of approximately $170 million, one of our premier cities, Atlanta, Georgia. As most of you know, in September, the City of Atlanta joined the Government Finance Officers Association and others in a suit filed in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Georgia. That suit challenges the constitutionality of the 1986 Tax Reform Act with respect to the arbitrage rebate requirements and the alternative minimum tax. Mayor Young, I understand that your remarks will not be limited to Atlanta's challenge of the constitutionality of the 1986 Tax Reform Act. Frankly, that is fine with us. We welcome your views on national and international public policy issues, especially given your broad experience in serving the public. The PSA wants you to know, however, just how much we appreciate your leadership in having Atlanta, the first city in our nation to challenge those aspects of the Tax Reform Act which frankly do violence to the Constitution, to federalism in general, and reciprocal immunity in particular. Mayor Young.
Thanks a lot. Let me assure you my remarks are going to be limited. And to say that I don't need to tell you anything about this suit, I don't need to tell you anything about the problems of this tax bill, I do want to talk with you as one of your customers. And one of the difficulties I'm having is that I feel like I got caught between investment bankers and the Congress, and I can't do my job as well as I was able to do it before. As I became mayor of Atlanta about 6 years ago, everything that normally came directly from the federal government, all of the community development block grants, the revenue sharing, the Economic Development Administration, all of the money that cities normally depended on to govern and administer was being cut off. I really almost didn't run for mayor because of that. And I thought I saw myself as being in a situation where I was going to be catching the blame for the decline and frustration of urban administration in America. And I saw in municipal finance, I saw in the public-private partnership a potential for replacing government money with private money. And it was with that kind of zeal that Atlanta launched into the municipal markets. And we've done everything, and we've done it well. I mean, our airport is really booming, and it's paying for itself. We're adding on with the revenues. We went in for another $125 million in housing for low and moderate income families. Underground Atlanta to the tune of about $85 million. In fact, we have had such success in the Atlanta region with municipal finance that I would say between the city and the county and one or two suburban governments, we probably have done $2 or $3 billion worth of bond business in the last 5 years. And it's all worked, and it's worked well for us. It's created economic growth and development that we could not have created otherwise. Strangely enough, it's enabled us to lower taxes a little bit. And we find the ability to put together these public-private partnerships as an essential way of running a city in today's world. Now, I say specifically today's world because I don't think the problems we're talking about are just problems for American cities. I think the Japanese government's got deficit problems. The Germans have got deficit problems. And essentially, governments all over are drying up. And yet in each of these economies, there are enormous amounts of capital being generated in the private sector, much of it not knowing how to reinvest. And we have seen the municipal markets as essentially a way of challenging private capital to public purposes. And I think that's something that the Congress ought to want. Now, what we got caught between the Congress and the hostility to you guys is just enormous amongst us poor politicians. And it's probably even worse amongst the poor bureaucrats that work for us politicians. And it was almost as though they didn't care. They were so concerned about the fact that you were making money, and maybe even more than you bond lawyers, that they were willing to, throw out the baby with the bath. And that's sort of what we got in the tax bill. And we as mayors, I think, realized it too late to have any impact. So really what I want to say is that, one, I think the mechanism that we evolved, listening to Mark Shields this morning and talking about a new agenda for the future, I think this is basically it. That if governments are going to be able, if people are going to be able to respond to problems in an effective and meaningful and profitable manner without large increases in taxes and without big government, it's going to be on a kind of a project financing that grows out of the municipal markets, a public-private kind of cooperation or co-financing. And I hate to see that jeopardized, because I see not only the city of Atlanta, which has probably done about all we can do for a little while, and we were smart enough at least to get our new Dome Stadium grandfathered in before the Tax Act was passed. But I think of all of the little towns, the Mound Bayou Mississippis and the Pritchett Alabamas. Georgia now has 23 black mayors that are all coming to Atlanta saying, how do you do the things that you've been able to do? And they see some potential in developing the kind of mechanism for encouraging partnerships between government and business. And they want to try to find ways to make those work in smaller communities. As I look at the state of Georgia has got to face the fact that Atlanta is growing enormously. And yet small towns are drying up and farmers are really going to hell in a handbasket. But they're going to hell in a handbasket because of debt. And when a group of farmers came to see me about what we might do, I said, the government of Georgia has a $200 million budget surplus. I don't know why we couldn't create some kind of land trust to guarantee farmland and help based on the value of farmland, which is rapidly converting to other purposes in Georgia. I don't know why we couldn't create some kind of trust that enabled you to refinance your debt at about 6% instead of 12%. And their answer is, if we could do that, every farmer, even in drought years, we could find a way to make a living, and we could find a way to keep small towns and our agricultural economy going. I'm saying that there's so much potential here that we were just beginning to tap, that I'm disturbed that Congress is beginning to put dampers on it. And what my suggestion is that somehow we try to get back. I wish we could count on this court challenge, going right up to the Supreme Court in a year or so. But nothing ever happens that quickly in the courts. And I'm only going to be mayor for 2 more years. What I'm wondering is, can't we get mayors who are involved, who all feel essentially the same frustration that I'm feeling and reopen this issue. I think specifically about the mayors who are former members of Congress, who could all graphically illustrate the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Mayor Koch of New York and Mayor Washington of Chicago, Don Frazier of Minneapolis, Bill Hudnut of Indianapolis. Maybe most important is outgoing mayor of Nashville, Dick Fulton, who was for many years a member of the Ways and Means Committee, and somehow work with you to see if we can't go back to the Congress, and most of whom are friends of ours. There are 3 members of the Congressional Black Caucus on the Ways and Means Committee, but by the time I was aware of the fact that we were in trouble. You couldn't get anybody to talk to you. I see such tremendous potential here that I think it's an issue that we just can't let die. And I see it as creating a potential for even a perspective on international development. One of the things that I've run into in my travels back and forth between, we now have direct flight service to Japan and to Zurich, and we're bringing in all kinds of foreign money all over the place, but they can't put it all in Atlanta. And they're looking for ways to do projects that would enable the Japanese to place the $1 billion of capital that they're generating every day in responsible projects of a global nature. And so I was shocked to find the Mitsubishi Research Corporation talking publicly now for the last 10 years about the need of a global infrastructure fund. We have an infrastructure panel coming up here, and I'm going to shut up and let them go. But a global infrastructure fund, as proposed by Mitsubishi Research Corporation, talks in terms of the need to put together at least 50 projects around the world of about $10 billion each. And that $500 billion amounts to a kind of global New Deal. And they're talking about the kind of thing globally that we've done in Atlanta locally, or that the state of Georgia needs to do on a state level. I think we do have an issue here that should not be closed. And I think we have a possibility with the agencies that are involved in trying to structure a meaningful and working economy in the midst of a crisis, an opportunity to do something that we should not let pass. And with that, I'll shut up and thank you for inviting me here, and look forward to working with you on these questions in the near future.
You know, if we'd had Mayor Young and a dozen or so mayors like him in 1985 and 86 and the 50 governors with that kind of passion, I don't think we'd be having to deal with just the bureaucrats in Washington now. But it's not too late. It can be turned around, and thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for giving us leadership in this. Any questions for Mayor Young? Yes, sir.
I find it, your particular comment that Atlanta was able to lower some of their taxes because of the advantages gained through the use of tax exempt funds. Is there a way to get that message out to the entire country that tax exemption is not something for the rest, but it's something that every taxpayer benefits from?
Well, it's hard. I think we were very lucky in that what's really enabled us to do it is growth. We've attracted about $47 billion worth of new investment to that metropolitan area in the last 5 years. And the growth is with another 500,000 jobs that's come into the region. And the growth has been so phenomenal. We cheated a little bit. We put on a 1-cent sales tax, but we lowered ad valorem taxes. And we find that that gives us a little better way of keeping pace with the growth.
Okay, thanks again, Mayor Young. I think we probably ought to move right to the next panel. Dave Hartley, are you here with your panel and the Congressman? Thanks again, Mayor Young.
keep rolling around.